Hello and welcome to another album analysis. In today's video we'll be taking a look at the 7th studio album from the English art rock band Everything Everything, titled Mountainhead. This album does serve as the follow-up to the band's previous release in the form of Raw Data Field from 2022, and they are certainly a band that have a very powerful discography. None of their previous 6 albums have had less than 7 out of 10 in terms of average aggregated ratings, which is absolutely incredible. Most bands tend to see a little bit of a dip in performance, but one thing this band do so well and so heavily is they kind of built this spiderweb for themselves. Every single one of their albums is just packed full of meaning and often references back to other albums. They really do tie everything and string everything together very, very well, and it's something they continue to build on. They've effectively built their own ecosystem, allowing their songs to dance and interchange between each other and make references to previous material when they're trying to kind of build these connections. So will this latest album strengthen the web, or will it finally be swatted away? Let's take a look at it track by track. Now, before we do get into the album itself, I do want to quickly cover the concept that we do see the band incorporate into this album, the idea of a mountainhead. It's about an alternate universe where people are constantly trying to build this mountain higher by digging this pit lower and lower to increase the height of the mountain. And the Mountainheads are seen as this kind of religious group that are just following the ancestors that they've had in building this mountain, and it's also going to explore ideas of capitalism and things like that. Use of triangles up to represent the 1% at the top, where there is a mirror at the top of the mountain that reflects yourself endlessly. So it's almost like a deity that is coming through in the shape of this mirror. Then also at the bottom of the pit we do have this massive snake called Hornis, which is also going to tie a little bit into the album's themes as well, almost acting as the opposite to this deity, to this description of this almost serpent-like character that dwells in the bottom and preys on the weak. So we'll see lots of these ideas that also help to tie in other elements of religion. So even just with the concept, the band really set themselves up to tie in a lot of the ideas we'll see explored across the album. Opening the album we do have Wild Guess, which really sets the tone with this uncertainty. We have this very fuzzy and clunky opening, almost imitating that lack of certainty, with people not really knowing what's going on or what to do, just following in the footsteps of their ancestors in the way they're just constructing this mountain by digging it away, by making it higher. And we see that throughout the ideas of some of the lyrics, under the compound eye of an enormous high-born moth. So we do see this kind of almost character, this deity effectively, that's just telling them what to do. Under that compound eye, it's setting this very dystopian nature for the album, looking at things like 1984, where you kind of have this idea of Big Brother's always watching, the compound eye of this moth that's just watching over everybody down in the bottom of the pit as they continue to dig and dig and dig and make this mountain higher. So it really sort of sets the tone, really shows the uncertain state that a lot of people are in the theme of the album and the overall concept. And straight off the bat we do get a number of different references to other pieces of material as well. Beach of Mask and Veil is actually a lyric that references to protests in Paris, and we will see this constantly throughout the album. There are so many references to other forms of media, material, history. It's something that the band really do incorporate, and sometimes there's actually going to be too many to kind of cover every single one. Moving into track 2, we do have The End of the Contender, which is actually inspired by a viral video about Ronnie Pickering, a guy that was very much felt he was still the talk of the town, but time had moved on and he hadn't kind of adapted with it. So it's actually inspired by an era of men who have been respected in the past but have struggled to adapt. And we also see a lot of variety really coming in on this particular track. It really looks at 2 very different ideas and concepts. First of all, again, it looks at this idea of kind of people not changing with the times, and that's a reflection on today's society and the way that technology has advanced so fast and so quickly that some people, older people, are being left behind. You look at maybe grandparents, people in their 60s, 70s that have struggled to use computers and phones and things like that. The idea of my battery's 100%, a lyric that really speaks in volumes about this idea because it has that double meaning. First of all, it looks at these people that still feel they're in their prime, that battery's still 100%, they're still fighting fit, but actually aren't quite doing so because they haven't been able to change. It also looks at society as a whole, the idea of recording others for clout, kind of pulling people down who feel they're still in their prime, that idea of constantly recording everything. So it actually is going to sign a lot of societal ideas in this track because it's actually inspired by the real life altercation between a cyclist and Ronnie Pickering. But we do get this very uplifting sound with these very dancing sounds that really come in to this track. But I love the way that it kind of touches on these 2 very different ideas in the the way that it looks at how society has changed, and also the way that it looks at Rodney Pickering, who was an amateur boxer, and the idea that it's the end of his reign, effectively the end of the Contender. He had his moment in the spotlight, but that's no longer there. So it really just looks at how society, how the older people are gradually being left behind, and that could also be looked at in the sense of the Mountainhead, how you may see in certain films and media idea of when people just get too old, they're not able to kind of contribute to these ideas and to these ideologies. So really explores quite a number of different things across the course of this track. In at track 3 we do have Cold Reactor, which is very much a concept setting track. It's quite interesting that this actually comes in as the third and not actually the opening, but they kind of want to set some other ideas in motion before actually releasing this. But it was the first track we did get to hear from the album as in terms of singles, and it all talks about the idea of them digging this almighty hole. So we built a mountain by digging an almighty hole, has this very quick delivery and talks about how society's become cold from working away tirelessly, just this constant strive to kind of build towards something, to build towards a future that is very advanced, no matter the cost, even if it's detrimental to your mentality, your physical well-being. And it actually talks about that because this cold reactor again has a double meaning. It looks at the kind of use of energy, the idea of a cold nuclear reactor and the way that it produces energy, but also looking at the fact that the way, well, how people today will respond to something in a way that they don't actually mean. How many times have you been sent a text and you put a laughing emoji even though you don't actually laugh? It's that idea of those responses through the screen that they really wanted to touch on, and it's something we see very, very heavily coming across. We do also get references to the Sword of Damocles and things like that. Again, lots of references, too many to touch on, but looking at how the idea of the sword hung above the king's head by a single string, and at any moment you can kind of be taken out, or the whole thing can come tumbling down because of just that one moment or that one domino that really sets off a massive change. So we really see how it kind of builds the world in and gives us a bit more of an idea in the way that they actually want to set up this album by exploring those capitalist ideas as well as those religious ones, and the way that society has become very cold in the way in which we interact with each other and kind of effectively help each other out, because we've become these cold reactors, and we're not really kind of showing that love and that same happy feelings because of the way that society has changed. Then in for track 4 we do have Buddy Come Over, a song that really explores the idea of cancel culture, and it has these much darker tones to reflect that. Make me a website so I can completely ruin my life. We've seen over the past number of years a variety of celebrities and things like that. But maybe one of their tweets has been pulled up from a number of years ago. This one moment that is eternalized on the internet can be your ultimate downfall. You can turn your entire life the wrong way by making a statement that the world doesn't agree with, or many don't agree with. So really looking at the way that many celebrities have been cancelled because of that. We'll make an oven and then we'll get in. The fact that we've constructed these platforms for free voice, for people to be able to say what they want, but then we're also burning them alive for some of the things that they say. The idea of Facebook and social media and these online forums where you should be able to have that anonymous opinion, but it can ultimately be your downfall. We can really see how the song really focuses on that idea. It's a golden age, I'm wearing half your face. And this is another really interesting lyric in the way that it explores everyone trying to kind of jump on bandwagons to become somebody else that they're not. You're only on the internet, you're only showing half your face effectively, you're only revealing half of yourself. So whilst it's a golden age effectively because you have that ability to share your opinions worldwide, it's also kind of only half of the story because you've kind of not bringing across your true opinions online, because you can say whatever you want and feel that there are no repercussions. So it's a really interesting track in the way that it explores this idea of free speech and cancel culture, and the way how it explores that it can be a very deadly trap that many people will fall into. Then we do move into Are You Happy, a song really exploring ideas of loneliness and isolation. And we even see with the actual title of this track, it's got that abbreviation on the Are You, and it explores the way that we don't get the same interaction and interface with people because of online. Well, how often do you have a conversation with someone through messages and text rather than actually speaking to them on the phone or in person? You don't get that same interaction, and it's so easy to isolate yourself from everybody because of the way that the world interacts now. So they really want to explore that. This will be the last time you see me. So it could look at things like depression, how people can isolate themselves and remove themselves from society, but also the fact of we go so long without seeing people in person as well. So it explores that. And we also see a lot of inspiration from Talking Heads. The band really do take inspiration from that. The idea of the water underground does actually reference to Once in a Lifetime by that band, and just really kind of take some ideas from them. Also the idea of Take Me to the Heart of Credit Hornis, another lyric that's kind of exploring that idea of that snake dwelling at the bottom of a pit. It's almost kind of that idea of being taken to hell or the afterlife, things like that. So you can kind of see that removal from the world, that place that nobody goes to because they're in fear of exactly what does rest there. So it could look at the afterlife as well. And we also do get some very interesting robotic automaton sounds, again maybe kind of linking back to that previous album in the form of raw data feel with some of the sounds they do incorporate on this track. Then for track 6 we do have The Mad Stone, which does have more of a religious element through the high backing vocals that we do have, and the way they really kind of set this very choral sound to this track. And it's almost like the idea of trying to entice people around the idea of this mirror atop of the mountain. They're almost trying to build people into Mountainheads to inspire them to join the religion and really just get them to come on board. So I love the elements we do see on this track. And in the post-chorus it does take us to that mountaintop where the mirror effectively endlessly reflects yourself, and it's something they really seem to touch on. But the idea of this mad stone can also reference to things such as cell phones and screens, that reflection of yourself effectively really coming through, and the idea of false ideals as well, because of the idea that it gives you these hits of dopamine, the idea of doom scrolling and constantly looking through this. So they continue to build in these real life societal ideas whilst also not dipping too far away from the concept that the band have built themselves. They really tie the two together very well hand in hand. But I love the way that this song also kind of continues to set the narrative for the album and pulls in those religious elements, and the idea of this stone that makes you mad. It's the idea of this cell phone effectively that you scroll and scroll and scroll, and you kind of forget to that point where you don't get that same dopamine from it because of the fact that you're just constantly doing it all the time. And also again the idea of reflections really coming through is something we see very heavily used across the course of the album, to kind of look at the way that society looks at itself and doesn't kind of question the way that things are actually done. As we do hit the middle of the album, we do have TV Dog, which feels something of an interlude, and it's only 2 minutes in length, but it does bring in some strings, and some elements were also recorded in a cathedral to give it a larger than life sound, but it does make those references to capitalism. Why is it always liars and ball games when I turn on the television? The idea of being sold these things that you don't need, made to feel that certain things are very cheap and easy to attain when ultimately they are not. So really being sold these corporate ideas of you need this product, you need that product, when ultimately it doesn't actually really something that you can attain because it may be out of your reach or doesn't actually do what it is set out to do. So it does give us a little bit of a breather from many of the heavy elements that are really incorporated in the album, just to kind of separate that first half from the second. Then in at track 8 we do have Canary, a song that really brings us down into the pits of the mine, and it's a beautiful track in the way it talks about that idea of the canary in the coal mine. It also makes great use of these oohs that are almost like a bit of a ghostly sound, so really kind of building a bit more of a feel around the track for those mines which you typically see is quite dark, quite hollow, things like that. I can breathe through the pen in my throat. It's actually a lyric that talks about having a tracheostomy, so living but barely. It's something we did see with canaries when they were put into coal mines. Because they had a higher breathing rate, they would actually dip them down. The carbon monoxide would, if there was carbon monoxide present, it would cause them to go unconscious, and it would lift them out and actually keep them alive and then resuscitate. They would be resuscitated effectively and allow them to do a lot of the legwork rather than sending people down and actually causing them to die. So you can really see how it's kind of touching on that idea of living a life where you're kind of constantly not really getting that strong element of life because you're in a very dangerous situation. Also the way that a canary could be used to give an early warning sign, so it could be about an oncoming disaster in society where sometimes we get these early warnings but we don't really kind of live up on them or just kind of react to them quick enough, and then we kind of question what happens when things actually go bad. So it does actually bring in some elements as well of radicalization about how people can kind of be turned into something that they probably shouldn't be, and maybe lead to bigger events or more catastrophic events later down the line. So you can really see how they bring that in on this track. It really is very smartly done through the idea of this canary in the coal mine. I mean, it has a very powerful sound to it, talking about under the ground and making great use of lyrics that really tie in the kind of whole idea of what kind of ties into the album, but again also into real life society today. Then for track 9 we do have Don't Ask Me to Beg, a track that really explores the physical body in the way that it's kind of being sacrificed to the bigger picture, so really feels like it's got more of a focus on the actual concept of this album. These people at the bottom, these bottom maybe 50% that are working away, digging this hole deeper and deeper and willing to give up their body and every part of them to actually just kind of allow the top 1% to kind of show this more impressive mountain off. And we can really see that coming through on some of the lyrics that do actually incorporate it into this track, and the way that it talks about your body breaking down. Typically when your body breaks down, that's when the more emotive state does actually come out. When you're super tired and you're just broken down, you do get more emotional. And the idea of don't ask me to beg, almost that idea of don't ask me to beg for my life, you've already taken everything else from me. And the idea of maybe just kind of be giving your all to this religion as well, to the point where you're kind of effectively giving your soul, your life essence to something that is effectively you see as bigger than you, but ultimately was it all worth it in the end? So it really kind of keeps things quite vague on this track, but it really just talks about the idea of sacrificing yourself to something bigger and what do you actually get out of it, because of the fact that you're the one that's effectively having to beg for the scraps from the table despite putting in most of the work. Then for track 10 we do have Enter the Mirror, a song all about giving yourself a pep talk, and really smart use of the metaphor again, the idea of mirror reflecting yourself, and it does fit in with that theme that really comes through on the album, even though the song was actually written by Jonathan Higgs, all about actually a friend that was struggling at the time, but it's still a great reflection on today's society of just kind of living in that very poor negative mental state, and sometimes having to give yourself that actual talk to bring yourself on that journey to a state of unity. And it does help to try and achieve this through a much softer, bouncier tone to allow you to kind of see yourself in a more positive way. And even in some of the lyrics, I love you because you're smashing into everything, the idea of atoms and things like that, really getting into a bit more of a scientific nature in this part of the track. But it's the way of, again, that human connection. I love you really being brought in to show that connection between people, and I don't want to see you destroy yourself, and how human connection can be so vital to maintaining positivity in today's world. So I really like the way it kind of brings that in, and again with the song being written for a friend, I like that it's kind of almost got that personal aspect of reflecting on yourself, but also the way that you reflect yourself onto others as well. So that idea of entering the mirror just really being the way to kind of just look at yourself very deeply and kind of gain an understanding of what exactly you're doing or how you're feeling, rather than just allowing yourself to almost be like stone. Next up we do have Your Money, My Summer, which has much more of a relaxed sound. It's almost like a track that's trying to remember simpler times or taking a chance to switch off and relax, which is something that effectively a lot of people don't do in society. You may look at those people that work 60, 70-hour weeks, they're not able to remember these good times, not able to spend their money because they're so busy working away constantly. So you can really see it touching on that idea with many of the lyrics that really do come in throughout the course of the track. And it also makes references to things such as Babylon, the prostitute on the beast, and also Robin Hood and Dracula. The idea that these summers can effectively feel like a bit of a fantasy because this time spent away and switching off. We live in a world now where a lot of people will take time off work, but they will continue to send emails and really get involved, occasionally open their laptop to check in how work's doing or get called in on their days off and things like that. So it's almost a song that reflects on how hard working we've become as a society. Then it can reference again to the ideas of the people that are digging this pit deeper and deeper. They don't really get that time off because they're effectively living in the area where they work. So it's just that constant idea of effectively just not allowing yourself that time off and not allowing yourself to take a break, because that's the way that society has become as time has progressed. Then for track 12 we do have Dagger's Edge, one of the most interesting tracks I do feel on this album. The first half is certainly very insulting. Vainglorious, your tower reeks of concrete, so makes more references to the ideas of capitalism and the fact that effectively this mountain has become the tower where you have the rulers at the very, very top. I'm making so much money I could kill you just to bill you for my time. Really a kind of play on the idea of time is money and money is power. So you can really see again how it's kind of making those references to maybe that 1% that have all the money and all the power because of the money. It's that endless cycle, and you've effectively got the people at the bottom are the ones that are allowing them to get stronger and stronger because they're effectively filling their lining their pockets. So you can really see that coming through with some of the lyrics on this. But then when we move into the second half of the track, it makes a very interesting switch into more of an existential feeling that really does come across. Your life is not the one you ordered, the customer is always right. So whilst all the power may seem like it's in the court of those people at the very top, technically the customer is always right. So there's the people at the bottom that effectively have all that power if they're willing to act on it. If the customer is willing to make a complaint, then usually it will be adhered to or it will be followed up. But a lot of the people staying silent means that actually nothing effectively ever gets raised. And we do also see more of the ideas of the religion coming in, the idea of the people not questioning the Mountainheads. The chanting of the rancid Hellkite hoot is filling up your toad-crossed mind. So this Hellkite hoot is effectively this kind of almost disciple effectively of the Mountainheads that's kind of converting people and turning them into these ideas. So that second half is almost as well like that rebellion, that rise up in revolt of those in the pit that are finally kind of opening their eyes to the way that things have become and willing to finally make that change. Then for track 13 we do have City Song, which again incorporates these ideas of isolation, the idea of being in a city and not really knowing anybody. And it's actually kind of touched on how as well we do have these big corporations, and some of the lyrics in there: I called up the office, said I'm not coming in, they didn't know my name, I didn't know my name. So that feeling of like lack of personalization, and the way that if you work in a big company, like you may not be known to most of the people around you, and that's the way that the world has become, partly because of things such as COVID and global pandemic and things that really haven't helped, but the amount of people that maybe don't know their neighbours and just don't really know a lot of the people around them, to the point where everyone just feels like they don't have any uniqueness anymore, which really blends the idea of blending into the system really coming through. But actually in the song it tries to reflect on the idea that you're not the only person that feels like that. Oh please, you're not alone, cast light over me. So give me the ability to put the light on myself, shine that spotlight on me, let me show who I really am. I'm not alone in feeling like this. So it's great in the way that it kind of says about the idea of uniqueness and not allowing yourself to become part of a system, to become just another number, and not just following along with the trend so that everybody is the same. Just having that uniqueness to yourself and allowing yourself to stand out in a city that's so full of people where you don't want to all become one mind in like, and just to the point where you're literally just following the leader effectively and copying yourself like them to a T. Then rounding out the album we do have The Witness, which is all about watching somebody go through a heavy psychological change. It does also have a very weird and wacky sound, but I really love some of the lyrics we do see in this track. The palace is burnt to glass, I saw it all from my shattering window. So really looking again at this idea of that mental break, the shattering window. You have this clear picture on what you want to do and where you want to go, but those cracks start to form and eventually your mentality can kind of break down, this shattering window. And I really love the way they kind of look at that observer style meaning as well, with the idea of maybe watching other people crack and fall apart because they're put under the pressure of life. And we do also see a very personal element brought into this track as well for Jonathan Higgs. He actually tells a story about how as a young kid he shot a bird with an air rifle, it landed into a shed or something like that, and then he looked at it, grabbed the rifle and then finished it off. And we see that in the lyrics: and the bird in the shed, it was looking at you, but you blew off its head because that's what we do. The idea of we as a society destroy things of beauty and destroy each other and do everything we can to pull each other down. So the fact that society is very self-destructive, and we do see that again tie in with the Mountainhead aspect in the way that effectively you've got these people that are willing to give up every essence of themselves to make this mountain bigger. They're destroying themselves in the pursuit of being Mountainheads, of just this thing that has been built into them over time to really bring in this idea. So I love the way that it really just kind of fits in with that final heavy meaning coming through on the album of not being very self-destructive and allowing yourself to kind of see the signs and take a step back. But it's great how it kind of touches on through the idea of the witness, the idea of observing that and really looking at that in yourself to be able to spot others when they're really kind of falling apart, or when things aren't going in a natural way, or they're being very destructive. This really is an album that is packed so full of heavy meanings and references. On the musical side, we do see the band really incorporate lots of different sounds and styles. They continue to do what they do best by bringing elements of kind of hip hop. We also have the use of the strings and some of the orchestral sounds. Also some fuzziness at times as well, some more light-hearted, very bouncy vibes really coming across. In terms of the music, it really does kind of build itself around many of the lyrical meanings that we do see, but the lyrics really do take the forefront. But I do feel that the band really very strongly constructed the idea of the Mountainhead element on this album, the way that they linked this world, this alternate world they built, to this actual societal ideas and also the ideas of capitalism and religion, and really built a comparison between the two, the way that it explored both in many of these tracks and made those constant references, those constant links, and also using that to be amplified by other forms of media. I mean, you see things such as Dracula, you look at like events they've looked at in history, such as the revolts in Paris, and a lot of other things that they really incorporate to help build this very strong picture and a lot of the descriptive nature of the way that this built-up world, this imaginary world is. You could almost picture it with your own eyes when you're listening to this album, and that's helped by the sounds that the band incorporates as well as the very heavy lyrical themes that we do see included within. So overall, I'm going to give this album an 8.5 out of 10. There is so much packed into this album, both lyrically and musically. It's a very pleasant listen despite the darker themes that it does explore, and no two songs ever really sound too familiar or too samey. They really have kept the ball rolling despite this being their 7th studio album, the way that they explore lots of different ideas and sounds and constantly make those references back to previous material on this album. They continue to build very strongly on this spider web. The only thing I think they maybe could have done slightly better with the album would actually maybe be reordering a little bit. With Cold Reactor kind of setting the concept, we do see that come in at track 3, and there are times where it can feel a little bit disjointed in exactly which part of the story the album is actually wanting to explore. But I think the way that it really looks at real world issues and societal breakdowns is very, very key in the way that the message they wanted to bring across with this album is certainly achieved. The only thing is, with them being a very art rock band and them having a very high level of intelligence, sometimes some of the lyrics can get a little bit lost. If you're just listening to it for the music, it's probably not going to be an album that you appreciate quite as well as if you understand the story behind it and the themes and the messages the band want to explore. Ultimately, I do feel that this is peak everything. It was probably up there with albums such as Get to Heaven from 2015, which many see as a bit of their magnum opus, but I definitely think this is an album that can very much challenge that. You really see the band continue to build on some very powerful themes and ideas, which I think is just fantastic to see them continue to evolve and build as a band. However, though, I would love to know your thoughts about this album in the comments section below. Some of the songs you love, some of the songs you hate, and why. And maybe just let me know how you feel it does rank up as an album as a whole. Also, if you would like to see some of these songs broken down in a bit more depth, I have covered them in previous videos, so you can find links to those in the description of this video. Also, if you'd like to see more content like this, then please do feel free to subscribe, and I will see you in the next album analysis.